Right then. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? Let me see who's online and who's here. Sorry I'm running a couple of seconds late because, frankly, I just got in from walking the dog. And people were being a bit strange today. Ooh! Paul from Chicago. I've been looking forward to this. Leander class. How, why? What drugs exactly were people on? Many things. Who am I kidding? And blame Treasury, and Treasury blames Parliament, and yes, they all blame each other. Hello, Paul from Chicago. Hello, John Share. Hi, Jim Heaton. Hi, Bijon. Hi, Jack Hunter. Hello, Jermac. Hello, Frederick Vago. Hello. Let's see. Hi, Richard Hughes. Hi, Ian Carr. Hi, Greg Sasaskowski. Hello. James, hello. So, hello, everyone. And let's see. Hi, William Cox. Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Dunrick Ironhammer. Oh. Hi, Jeff Beeler. Hi, Aviator 1701E. Hi, Daniel Freeman. Right. Well, today is going to concentrate on the cruisers, Daniel, for starters. I will, though, at some point go through the frigates and the various other Leander class that have come through. Hi, Jim Heaton. Hi, DGV40. Hello, Sasha Flibov. Hello to Bulgaria. I've got lots of friends from Bulgaria who work with me at Kingston Uni, so it's nice to have someone from there here. Makes me feel like I'm at work. Hi, Michael Rose. Hi, Matthew Malecki. Hello. Hi, Derp Squad. Hi, Jeffrey Indorf. And Paul Beswick. Hello. Calvin Gassman. Sorry, late. Got sucked in by bilge pumps. That's good. We like people being sucked in by bilge pumps. That workshop engine. Hello to Belgium. Hi, Felix B in Switzerland. And I think I said hi to William Cox, but if I didn't, I'm going to say it again. Right. I'm glad you're enjoying the bilge pumps. We had Sal, who came out this week, Salamander. Then we have a run in a row of 4 guests. So we have Andrew Lambert next week talking about leadership. Then we have, I think his name was Dr. Michael Carter, but I could be getting that wrong, to talk about the issues with ships. Well, he's a marine archaeologist, and he's talking about ships from World War II and what is basically going on with them as they decompose and rust in the sea, and whether they're likely or not to blow up. Spoiler alert, they are. It's quite worrying, quite how many of them, and how quite a potential disaster. And then we are going to have Sal Marcialgo, probably just mangled his surname, on to talk about marine, the merchant marine, and what their developments are going on, and what maybe navies could learn from the merchant marine, because they're having to deal with very similar issues coming in vis-a-vis automation, crew sizes, managing crew expectations, and there might be something for the navies to learn. In fact, I think there probably is going to be. So, Danny Freeman, is Fluffy Research Assistant okay with all the weird people about? Basically, his major problem is with people deciding they're going to not respect the whole social distancing rules, because he lives with 2 shielded people, and he likes getting hugs from his mummy and his sissy, so he doesn't want to have to go through, well, and he isn't the most keen in the world. He likes swimming, and he likes anything to do with water normally, but if you say the B word or the S word, as in shower and bath, he's less keen on those as concepts. Pond, very weird lake, which possibly has all sorts of weird smells in. Yes, that's your dog. He's in there going for, yay, swim time. You want to clean him afterwards. He's sort of look at you as if you're evil. Hello, Felix B. Hello, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hello, Blackbird SL71. Hello. Hello, Sasha Blivov. Do you have a lot of students from Bulgaria? I have a few students from Bulgaria at Kingston Uni, and I have a fair number of members of staff. And Kingston Uni's got quite a good mixture of very interesting people, including, of course, we originally had Drakinfidel when he was doing his civil engineering degree, and we have his brother as well there as one of the, working in the civil engineering department, and so works in the same section as me. Dunkirk Ironhammer. I'd offered to change my name, but not sure if you rather want to read a Norwegian name. I actually like Dunrik Ironhammer. I don't mind trying to read off a Norwegian name, but I do like Dunrik Ironhammer. I think it's a cool one. To be honest, it makes me think less of Norway than it makes me think of Terry Pratchett, but we'll leave that to one side. Jim Heaton. Ouch, yes. This dugout log canoe from circa 10,000 BC was probably called Leander. Quite possibly. There is some stuff in there here that's going to be quite interesting because I'm getting into some of the names of the class. Right. Oh, RFA Unsung Heroes of the RN. Paul Wilson. Yeah, I'd agree with that. William Cox, read Leif Erikson's Vinland Saga. If you get to the Pinchon novel by mistake, read it. It's pretty wonderful as a time capture of USA culture. I have read those a while back. We extraordinaire. Hello, just arrived. I somehow think you're talking about the floppy research rather than Leander's. Otherwise, there's a lot of naval history I'm missing out on. Yes, we are talking about the floppy researchers written quickly. Right then, so let's get this up and refresh it. Now, before anyone starts thinking, why is there not being an introduction video today? Well, for rather similar reasons as there was an introduction video on Tuesday, I am saving them, recording them all as long patrols and some 2-minute ones for next week. So you get some 2-minute videos coming out about individual ships, and you're going to get a couple of nice long patrols coming out, and basically, along with some episodes of 4 random books, they're going to cover while I'm on my research week, which I hope you like, because I hope you like them, because when I do, I am probably going to end up with about a research week a month, looking at my schedule coming up for a couple of months. And so I hope it's sort of a practice I'm going to try and get into, because I'm not, and don't take this the wrong way, too keen on the idea of trying to present brew ships, etc., from, although that wouldn't have been the case in this week, from hotel rooms, because it just won't have the same amount of books in it. Although I do take quite a lot of books with me when I go on trips. In fact, my girlfriend swears that I'm obsessed because, even she only takes one suitcase of books. I've been known to take one small bag of clothes, one suit bag, as on top with smart clothes, and 3 roller cases of books. They're useful. They're important. JP, watch Drax and Mighty Jingle's videos at his homework, plus 1 on Leander, Texas. Cool. Generally, Felix Speak, the loss of Sheerness will be worn by no. There is this very small steam railway that goes far not from Sheerness along the coast. I would definitely mourn the loss of that. And honestly, Sheerness is quite useful at the moment. Stone Wilson, if we are talking about ancient logboat, may I recommend Argonauts of Stone Age by Adrius Pigeon? Quite interesting. Yes, it is. I've only read a chapter of it, though, but I got to send a chapter as a PDF to read, and it was quite cool. Hello, Golden Eagle. Hello, old Richard. Dirt Squad, Dirt Squad. Do you take more works than clothes? Yes. Pulisic, on the subject of the RFA, the new fleet support ship should, in my opinion, be named after older RN fleet anchorages. I would start with RFA Scarborough Flow. That's definitely an idea I could get behind. Richard Hughes, Dr. Clark, not in the bunker. That would be appalling. To be fair, hopefully in October, fingers crossed, I will be moving from in here to a garden office, which will hopefully be built, because we're getting a Lugard log cabin. And it's going to be divided into two. So it's going to have two doors, and it's going to have a nice little central wall, which is going to have soundproofing both sides, because on one side, one office is going to be my sister, and one office is going to be me. And considering we're both professional lecturers doing online teaching at the moment, that is going to be... there is a reason our mother is kicking us out in the garden, as we are both at home at the moment. Basically, she's decided that that's better for her eardrums. She's very sensible like that. Hey, Brock Payne. Right, so, the Leander class. I classify them as the RN step back into light cruisers, and so I'm going to quickly explain why I'm using that phrase. So, if I grab my... I have the book somewhere. Oh, there it is. The lovely Cruisers of World War II International Encyclopedia by M.J. Whitley, which you've seen me use before. Does have some errors, as I acknowledged in before, which I have checked this time. And I've also been using this old lovely thing, Norman Freeman's British Cruisers, and Warships After Washington by John Jordan, and where's the other cruiser book on? Oh, this one. This, of course, the Malcolm Wright, British and Commonwealth Warship Camouflage World 2, Cruisers, Mine Layers, etc. And it's got some nice stories in, which I'm going to keep out for a bit. Now, basically, if you are looking for the previous example of the Royal Navy, you can go no further than my D, E, and F, my C, D, and E classes reviews, which I've been looking at the light cruisers, because I'm slowly working my way through the light cruisers of the Royal Navy. And the point about the D class, and there's a reason I'm talking about this, is because really the RN starts off looking at the Leander class, sort of going, we haven't been building cruisers in a while, light cruisers. We've got a new turret which works quite well. We know it works quite well because we've been testing it out on HMS Enterprise for a long time. Hello, Carl Gannon. Hello, GC Fusion. And Tim Coltman. Hello. Tim Coltman. Please stop recommending books. The two Coastal Forces books you just recommended have arrived here. Great. This is costing me moments. Hello. Well, that's the whole point of being a bibliophile and being, loving these books. It's one of those, let's put it this way, one of those bad habits that people don't frown on you communicating with other people. Hello, Alex Hunt. All right, then. Ay, caramba. It's fun. So, 1930s Royal Navy. Basically, the amount of people who turn around and go, oh, the Leander class, they are the London Treaty ships. No, they're actually ordered before the London Naval Treaty happens. But they are certainly done with it in mind to an extent of what the British want from it. And then there's the reality that they're built to. Were supposed to be trade protection. But the trouble is, I often point out the Leander class are sort of the Royal Navy finding its feet. in ship design, because they have an idea of what they want their light cruisers to do, but they're not quite sure how to apply them. And honestly, you have HMS Enterprise here, which of course has her double 6-inch turret forward. And that turret is the basis internally for the turrets which come to dominate the Royal Navy in not just her version, not just in the Leanders, Arafusers, Amphions, but under some small modifications, the towns, the crown colonies, all these. And here's the first thing you need to know about that turret. That turret is made by the same people who brought you the 8-inch turret on the first generation of the County-class cruisers, which could go up to 70 degrees. In other words, as far as the Royal Navy was concerned, building with that turret meant they were building the Leanders as able to perform air defense with their 6-inch guns. Decision. Okay, now I shall defend Adrian's honors from all canals. I don't think that'll need to be done. Carl Gausberg. The 1882 HMS Leander was a depot ship from 1904 to 1920, so I am a bit of odds how to mention her in World War I in tragic context. Oh. Golden Eagle, is your sister Karen Clark? Yep, Dr. Karen Clark. She's one of the best at geotechnics in the world. She's head of the foundation year at Kingston Uni. Tim Cohn, Leander class, pretty much the prettiest cruisers the RN ever built. Not so sure about that. But they are. It's interesting that this is what is the light cruiser before the Leanders are built. So this is the point. This is your light cruiser. And in many ways, the Enterprise is just as much a halfway house as the Leanders, because it's the Royal Navy finding techniques and going, hang on, we've got all this technology, we need to test it out. So this is them testing out the turrets, the targeting, and to an extent some of the engine structures of what a light cruiser was going to be. And now they're building the Leanders. Alex Hunt, they're London Treaty ships in the same sense that the London Treaty is built around them. More to that extent than they are built. This is the point. They are more to an extent London Treaty is built around them and the Royal Navy's growing idea of what they're for than it is that they are built as part of the treaty, as a result of the treaty. Ian Carr, were the Leander's replacement for the scrapped early C-class cruisers? In theory, they're sort of along those lines, but again, they are. You see, the early C-class cruisers are very much built with, I would argue, the North Sea, and to an extent, some of the Mediterranean conflict in mind. And the later C-classes, the ones which survive, are all the ones which are the evolved C-class, which are built more of the idea of the Far East, the Indian Ocean, the large conflict. And it's one of the reasons why I find it strange, because the amount of people go, they are built to be this long-range thing, these trade protection cruisers, and you go, they have pretty much the same operating parameters, give or take a little bit, as the D and E class. So yeah, those aren't the new things about them. The new things about them are their turrets and their structural layout and their armor positioning. To an extent. Golden Eagle. It wasn't the RN that built them, it was the shipbuilders. Well, you're not quite correct there. Because you have to remember, in the 1930s, there was still something called Her Majesty's Dockyards, which were part of the Royal Navy. And as we'll be getting to in a bit, several were built in Her Majesty's dockyards, Devonport and Portsmouth. So, you know, they are technically built by the Royal Navy. And they're built for the Royal Navy, all of them. Hello, Warlord. Hello, Warlord. Well, Tiberius. Hello, Roland Cash. Right. So, Leander class stats. And this is where it gets really quite interesting. This is the fun part of the Leander class. So, concept as ordered. They were looking for 6,400 tons, roughly. That's good. Part of the Navy or Admiralty? Part of the Navy, I'd say, broadly speaking. The cruiser. Would you recommend? I do recommend this book, The Cruisers of World War II, an International Encyclopedia. I do recommend it. It's a lovely book, and it's. If you want all the ships in there roughly, the thing is, books like this, you can always point to them and go, oh, they have this sort of misunderstanding, or they don't look enough depth for this class or that class. And the thing is, they're a good overview because they have everyone evaluated by the same author. And so it's your starting point for comparisons. If you want to do comparisons between different Navy's cruisers, this is a good one to start off with. I actually support the idea of having naval yards. In fact, I would have quite liked the Royal Navy to maintain a naval yard, especially for smaller ship production. But, you know. Has Dr. Clark ever knowingly not recommended a book he owns? Usually there are some books, basically any book I actually use on air and discuss on air is one I would happily recommend. If there are books which you see which never get talked about on air, the odds are they wouldn't be ones I'd recommend. Right. So, let's get back to it. Dimensions were supposed to be about 150 meters, length, beam 14 meters, depth about 5 meters. Now, I've done some rough conversions from this, but I could have given the feet in bands and all those things. I decided to put it in metric, even though they weren't working metric, because I know it tends to be easier for people to work from metric backwards. And Admiralty, 3 drum boilers generating roughly 60,000 ship horsepower, able to achieve 30 knots or 5,000 nautical miles, about 10 knots, was roughly what they were looking for. And before anyone starts in on me and going, I know this sort of X or this was design X or design V or these things, I am grouping together a whole lot of designs. I had one of those people yesterday. It was during my mum's birthday, and I got a phone call from someone who I'd written an article. I'd written an article for one magazine. And one of the other authors in the magazine decided to call me up on my mum's birthday. And even though I said, it's my mum's birthday, I'd like to go, they wanted to critique me because you averaged in these designs and you didn't list them all out. And I went, we write for the same magazine. You and I both know that the word limit for there is about 1,000 words. You know, you can't start deciding that you're going to go into every single type and every single ship detail in 1,000 words, because then you'll never say anything. You'll just list off the facts and figures. And just because my article got selected and yours didn't, doesn't mean anything. Anyway, so the Armoured was always going to have 8 6-inch guns in 4 twin mounts. And as I've said, those mounts were able to go up to 70 degrees. So technically, these were AA cruisers as far as the Royal Navy was concerned. 6-inch guns for anti-aircraft fire. Oh Lord, help the poor aircraft. Now, the interesting thing is, again, I've italicized the 12.5-inch AA machine guns in 3 quadruple mounts. because the designs are interesting. Some don't have any, but very quickly you see them go from 1 to 2 to 3. The 8 torpedo tubes starts at the beginning, and the armor starts off roughly to say it's the same at the beginning. It's basically all or nothing. Because let's be honest, 1-inch armor on your deck, virtually nothing. That's really not going to stop much, but it's what they were going with. Because they were trying to build them to a minimized, thing. To minimize sort of tonnage. So they get as many as they could. The reality is built, as we pointed out, is different. They get longer. They grow by almost 20 meters. So it's at 19.1 meters to be precise. Their beam goes up by 3.1 meters. They get deeper in draft. They go from having no one's quite sure how many Admiralty free drum boilers to having 6, which generate 72,000 ship horsepower. So you can work that back. If 6 generate that, they were probably looking at 4 to 5. It would seem, or maybe 6 down-rated ones. There were sort of different discussions about it, which via 4-shaft geared turbines was able to achieve 32.5 knots, or 5,730 nautical miles at 13 knots. Now, this compares quite well with, and this is one of my little points I'm going to be making. Let's consider the E-class. Well, they could go 8,000 nautical miles at 15 knots, so they're definitely not filling in the E-class role. But go back to the D-class. Well, the D-class could do 6,700 nautical miles at 10 knots. Go back, the C-class can do a little bit sooner. So the idea these are suddenly something brand new, trade protection cruisers, and there's something new the Royal Navy's developing into post-treaty, isn't. They are a continuation in many ways of the D-class. And the idea has been you have slightly more, nice weight, 6-inch guns, a slightly more armor, slightly more protection, and you accept a slightly shorter range for doing that role. All right, then. Those raked funnels, though, we'll get into that. Cotteraunus, hello. I'm constantly ranting about the inadequacies of my own field. We all are. Danny Freeman bought. There was a copy on Amazon for a third of the price of Freeman's British Cruisers. Yes, and honestly, I would say Freeman's Cruisers is good. It's one of his better. It's definitely one of the. He doesn't do a bad book, but one of his better ones. But I would go, if you're looking for a comparative and you want to know about older cruisers, then Whitley's the better one. We'll get back quickly to Leander. But as you see, built in Devonport. Right. Let's see if there's any questions on this slide. Golden Eagle, I missed the last stream, but I have a relative in the family that served on Aurora. Cool. Stephen Wilson, Golden Eagle. A lot of warships can go a bit Hollywood about the ships, but fun. It is fun. G Student, happy related birthday to your mum. I will pass it on to her. That was good. Sounds like he was mistaking a popular history article for an academic one. This is my point. I love writing for magazines, and I love writing. You see, the thing is, in a journal article, I have 8,000 to 10,000 words, depending on the journal. Some are far less than 5,000. Some are, slightly more. In a book, you have 80 to 100,000 words. In a PhD thesis, you have that. In a more popular naval magazine, you have about 700 to 1,000 words. You adjust your writing to it. You adjust your audience. It's like, this is going to sound strange, but the presentations I would give on YouTube are very similar to the ones I would give into to a conference. But in a conference, I will emphasize some more academic points from in sort of things. I'll talk about the liturgy and the different styles of writing and etc. on the academic phrasings of the books available and talk about them from an academic standpoint. In a YouTube video, I will talk about the fun stories more and some of the bits which would be considered academically slightly strange. I.e., if we're going for a classic story, there's the cheese. The great Drax's favorite story of the cheese, which is lost. We all must mourn the cheese. That's a lovely story and one I love doing on YouTube, and I love doing when if I'm just doing a public talk. But if I'm doing an academic conference, that wouldn't really fit. You adjust to your audience because it's about making history fun and interesting for people, and so that everyone can go away both having enjoyed their time there and learn something, hopefully. That's the two things you want to accomplish. Sorry, that's me off my hobby horse though for an evening. Going, yes, but I can't bring them back into history when I nerd out on them in the comment sections of streams. Then I saw something that said a base of 12 may be from counting the knuckles of the fingers, not from one hand. Possibly. Ian Carr, can you expand on the unit principle incorporated in modified Leanders? I'm going to actually do a separate bit on the amphibian class because the amphibian class are built to all sorts of various things added into them. I call them modified Leanders, yes, but I'm going to treat them as a separate and do a separate class bit about them because they deserve it, because they do so much, but they are, again, experiments. The whole Leander class and the modified Leanders are Royal Navy experimenting and developing itself. There is the interesting thing here. The Leander class start out as being looking for 6,400 tons. And I would argue most of them, when you're talking about their true displacement, are in the region of a lot more than that. That's standard displacement I'm giving those figures for, because their full load is even more variable and goes even higher. Gonil, King Midas's golden touch paints everything zestfully yellow. Calm Guzman, re 6 times triple AA. Given that time fuses 6-inch triple A, given that time fuses were mechanically set and relied on black powder, the added fragmentation radius offsets this somewhat. It would be interesting still. Golden Eagle, how does arrow fuses relate to Leanders? Arrow fuses are a couple of generations long, and they are basically what happens, and I will get into this more in the summary, is as the development goes on, the Royal Navy goes Leanders, Amphions, and then they go, right then, so the Leanders can't, what can the Leanders do? They end up having the towns and their arrow fuses as their two sort of designs coming off it. Yeah, he was part of the commissar that orchestrated the defections of communists. Yeah, interesting. Jerison, the cheese on HMS Nelson. Cool. As we're talking about. William Cox, I think the Airfuse is fine looking as shit, but I think she could do a few more 40mm guns. Oh. Incal, what species of cheese? It was a fine wheel of cheddar, stored in a compartment just next door to the torpedo room on HMS Nelson. Yeah, that was good. You probably wouldn't talk about the Blackburn as much in the academic conference unless you were in Blackburn, maybe. Probably not. Juicy, that's good. That tribal on steroids does like a good description of how some RN cruisers were led. I always put the Arafusers class into that sort of. Arafusers are tribal class destroyers are basically extended tribal class destroyers, and I would say the Leander class, if I was going to pick, are more sort of like the J class destroyers in their sort of their style of operations. Daniel Freeman, can the damage done to the UK cheese industry in World War II, all of that lovely variety is lost in favour of standardisation wartime cheddarish. It was tragic to lose what was probably a fine pre-war cheese. Scipio Africanus, I feel that Herodotus is the better between he and Thucydides. History is the genre of literature. We create themes and theses and seek to support our arguments by coherence. This is literature. I would agree that to an extent, yes. I do find people draw from history what they want to draw, which is why I always find it funny when people go, this is the truth. And I go, well, is it a scientific engineering fact of that equipment? Or are you talking about your perception on what people made decisions of people did? Because unless you absolutely believe, they write down exactly what's going through their mind at that time when they're making that decision, and you believe that that written account is 100% accurate, and they are not in any way modifying it to make it look better for posterity, then that's the only way you know exactly why they did anything. Otherwise, the rest is all our best guess. Hi, Scipio Africanus. Cash, this is just got back from job started on Monday. First time not doing night shifts for 8 years. Good for you, mate. Right, so let's consider HMS Leander. And she has an interesting career and is quite fun, but she's actually named for a guy, and this is what I find interesting. Leander, named for Leander of Abydos, the story is that he swum, well, how to put this? He would swim Hell's Point every night to meet with a priestess who wasn't supposed to be having a relationship, called Hera. And basically, one night, there's a storm, candles. Anyway, he drowns. His body washes up. And Hera, in her upset over losing her lover, apparently commits suicide. This is what the Royal Navy name a ship after. A guy who drowns. And they don't just do it once. They've done it many times. There have been many ships named Leander. And when I say many, I mean 6. They're naming ships after a guy who drowned. Literally. Angus O'Sonnell, don't worry. Sorry I'm late. I was listening to Bill Trumps. She's launched from Her Majesty's Dockyard, Devonport. As you can see, she's ordered on the 18th of February 1930. She's laid down on the 8th of September 1930, launched 24th of September 1931, and commissioned the 24th of March 1933. As is normal, therefore, she takes quite a long time between launching and commissioning because she's the first in class and they're testing things out. Interesting enough, she is very historically prominent. If you read... Where have I got it? Around me somewhere? Or at least I had it the other day up here. I have managed to... Oh, there it is. If any of you have been fortunate enough to read Roskell's account of the Navy at War 1939 to 1945, for some reason, and I of course cannot think why, considering her actual wartime experience, which was quite considerable, but nothing as massive as you normally. Leander comes up rather a lot. boat and gets whole pages about her service. Can't think why. I actually love Roskill. I think it's a cool book. It is interesting. It's not always my favorite, but it's got pictures like Destroyer depth charging a U-boat here. That's a Hunt class destroyer escort. Dunkirk. Graph space sinking. Atlantic convoy duties. A submarine being blown up by a destroyer. Fun times. HMS Bismarck engaging HMS Hood, and the end of HMS Ark Royal. And this is the Pursuit of the Bismarck, is a nice map here. It's a good book. It is an interesting book. It's Roskill's Navy at War in 1939 to 1945. But it does mean HMS Leander, and then eventually HMNZS Leander, does get an enormous amount of history written about her and her service in World War II. Actually, there are technically more articles and more papers written about her than there are either Ajax or Achilles. I'm not quite sure. That might have changed recently, but basically, if you're talking about up to about the 1960s, 70s, when the survey was done, there'd be more literature written about HMS Leander. And pretty much that's because Roskill is the Navy's chief historian after he retires as a captain from the Royal Navy, and she was the ship he was executive officer of. And, you know, Stafford Thompson, hello. What a point to come in, a guy who drowns. Then there's Sadmiral. Good day, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Hello, Felix Shamar as well. Leander should have had a ship. He should have had a kayak. That's good. But he drowned in the name of love, and he did it in a Greek epic. Yeah. Golden Eagle, Leander should be a submarine. No. Wasn't Felix Shamar? Wasn't Hera super Zeus' spouse? I could have been pronouncing it badly. It is spelled Hero, but it's supposed to be pronounced Hera, I think. Yes, and there is HMS Hero, who's named after the girl Leander was swimming to when he drowned. As Bitchon says, the fictitious Leander class frigate is named after her. Oh, God. Calvin Gasman, the current HMS Leander might invite the metal band Leander Kills, named after the frontman. There isn't a current HMS Leander as far as I know. Annoyed Z Emperor, how you supposed to think of battle cruisers as dreadnought armored cruisers, as they were originally named? Well, that's off topic, but probably. Annoyed Zebra? Probably. That's to an extent more likely than what they were. I'm sure the guy who wanted a flare class named HMS Pansy was suggesting that very idea, even if it wasn't an L class. Oh, God. Oh, no, Leander is a good ship, and she has a very interesting World War II. As I said, not quite as interesting as her history would make out. In 1937, on her journey from Europe to New Zealand, she carried out aerial surveys of Henderson, Oene, and Ducie, which are Pitcairn Islands, and also put a plaque there named King George VI. This island belongs to His Britannic Majesty King George VI, which is kind of interesting when you consider. We might have to start doing that again in the world, because the idea had been that didn't need to be done anymore. But as the Danish and the Canadians would tell you, they have to do that on an island which they both claim, and regularly they swap alcohol on, which is very nice. She serves initially in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. She then goes off into the Mediterranean. Eventually, although she does sink an Italian vessel near the Maldives. Intercept ships. Basically, she does trade protection for most of the beginning of World War II. Then it goes to the Mediterranean campaign, Mediterranean fleet. Then she returns to the Pacific Ocean in September 1941, and she has all sorts of fun in World War II. She even was joined in Rear Admiral Walden Lee Ainsworth's Task Group 36.1, along with Honolulu and St. Louis. That's the USS Honolulu and USS St. Louis. To have fun dealing with the Japanese cruiser Jinstu in Battle of Columbraga. My notes are fun on this one. Anyway, go back before I'm not starting that while I'm not looking at them. I'm not looking at the screen. She's a good ship, but how do I put this? She is far more prominent than she actually probably should be. But she's still cute. Picasso, hello. Right, let's see. Googled it. The priestess was called Hera. Yeah. Hera, I think it's pronounced. I think it's pronounced Hera. I am not sure why, but I was told it once and I'm keeping it up. Let's see. Richard Hughes. What were the greatest strengths and weaknesses of the Leander class? Well, we're sort of going to get into that as we go along. I'm going to be talking about that more when I get to Achilles. William Cox, I think Monitor Hms Thunderchild should be equipped with the most modern scientific armament, dynamite gun. Oh, that'd be scary. Android Zebra. I meant the first few battle cruisers were called Dreadnought armored cruisers, and yeah, they were sort of. Good evening, Dekusu. Thank you. There are few, if any, Greek heroes who are particularly heroic in modern eyes. Ajax committed suicide. Achilles was prepared to lose a war over a relatively minor point of pride. Achilles was very interesting as a whole. That squad. I'm fairly sure if he'd minded, he wouldn't have read out your question. No, I tend to treat, because we're going to be getting into an armor discussion in a bit about this class of cruiser. I didn't mind getting into the quick discussion on battle cruisers. William Cox, the main, a 2-ship class, was advertised as a battleship in the papers, but it was an armored cruiser, I think. Let's be honest, don't take this the wrong way, but I've seen papers which call river-class patrol vessels battleships. We'll just leave it to one side. And I'm talking about the modern OPV armed with the 30mm cannon. On paper, there is one of my Archangel class. It's a Leander. Take care and best wishes. Always pleasure. Looking forward to catching up tonight. Enjoy. Take care. In car, there's a plaque on Rockall. Cool. Dope Scott, we go off topic quite often, including half-hour conversations about Blackburn, and Talk 2. Yeah. Oh my God, wait. I am all about context. That's what I try and teach all my students. Context. All these things, none of these things happen in their isolation. They are all in the context. Odysseus killed all the suitors for his wife and all the servants who had looked after them after making them tidy away the corpses of the suitors. Odysseus is another interesting gentleman. Richard, Achilles, Ines Ellie was the star of the 1956 film Battle of the Plate. Yes, she was. She's also Leander and Achilles survived longer than all the rest. All the rest are either sunk in World War II or scrapped in 1949. Leander is scrapped in 1950, and Achilles goes on serving quite a long time as INS Delhi. Alex Hunt, the islands weren't quite the unit for decisive fleet action by World War II, though, so it makes sense they'd be have a safer war. They didn't really have a safer war. Neptune managed to. Yeah, we'll get into Neptune in a bit. There is a reason why I've done Leanders this week at the same week as I did Force K, and why both are being turned into long patrols for next week. In when I'm going to record them properly tomorrow, and bits and a load of 2 minute, 2 minute sort of quick videos for next week as well, because they do fit together quite well as that. Right. Ian Carr, is Stephen Roskill the author? Yes, Captain S.W. Roskill. It's a good book. I do like it. I'll stick that there. J. Mason, was about to post I quite like Odysseus, perhaps the most modern psychologically of them all. Possibly. Colin Gasman, in 1921, HMS Leander had a fairy Sea Fox, which was later changed for a submarine wars. Did it upset the crew? Honestly, no, but the Sea Fox fitted, but looked quite a lot cuter on her than the Walrus. The Walrus didn't actually last on the Leanders that long. They were soon exchanged for a lot more increased AA armament. So basically, they got rid of the catapult for the AA armament. But in the meantime, the Sea Foxes and the Walruses were quite useful for their scouting roles. And they were used to trap down on trade. They did get used in the trade protection and the trade prosecution role. So they were very much economic warfare ships, and they were used quite successfully for that. The whole point about the Leanders was really like the Arafusas. They should have been able to be used from Malta as part of Force K. They turned out to be less successful at that because the thing is, the Arafusas were just that bit more suited to the style of operations that they were engaged in. The quick and dirty night fights. Whereas the Leanders were more... They would do quick and dirty night fights, but that was mainly they did it in larger oceans than in the Mediterranean. There is sometimes something to be said for being slightly smaller. Jeff Beeler. The Anzac Leanders spent more time in harm's way, hence the 3 losses. Neptune, NZ staff that lost, Perth and Sydney. Hobart and Leander being damaged and out of service for the rest of the war. To an extent, yes, but Achilles was also New Zealand staff. Neptune was a... And Neptune is an interesting one. She's got both a large New Zealand contingent and a large South African contingent aboard her. So she's kind of an interesting one. There's got Captain Evil. There was also an article in Daily Star complaining that the Royal Navy was spending $4.5 million on a 4.5-inch gun described as shorter than a toothbrush. Look, this is why I say more academics should be on. Should be able. More academics should be happy to talk to newspapers, and more, people should talk to these people, because honestly, when those sort of things happen, it's more because the journalists often haven't been able to get people to talk to them and explain the stuff, because there aren't in. There were days when there were specialist journalists who did the stuff, followed this for years. I've got a book written by one, which is the entire history of the Royal Navy as he followed it, because he was a reporter for so many years. And I cannot see it around me at all. But these days, journalists are mostly generalists, and they do multiple articles. Jamie is a good example one. Armored Carriers puts that together. Jamie Seidel. He is an amazing journalist, but he will tell you he's only as good as the sources he's able to get hold of. And if you're not able to get hold of the good sources, you won't. Right then, so Achilles. I don't need to go much into the story of Achilles, but again, I'm not sure why he becomes the name of a ship, but he does. And again, has been used far, far too many times. Right, so built by Camel Air in Birkenhead, so for some reason my favourite of the Leander class, I can't think why. I'm not at all biased towards Camel Airs. The suggestions that I am biased towards Camel Airs are completely unfounded and terrible, but my dad did do his apprenticeship there, and I do spend a lot of time talking about ships which have come from there. Ordered on the 16th of February 1931, laid down 11th of June 1931, launched the 1st of September 1932, commissioned 10th of October 1933. So again, takes a while to get in the service, but does get in the service fairly quickly. One of the interesting things in this class is that thanks to Hms Enterprise having future-proofed the 6-inch guns, they turned out to be quite good. The engines also were future-proofed to an extent, and also turned out to be quite good. The big problem was putting in all the electronics, which they were trying to do, and finding that really, when they were trying to do everything they wanted to do, up the horsepower, up the speed, up the range, and all these things, it upped the ship far more than they were expecting. And it's kind of interesting because in 1933, there is a new third Sea Lord appointed who immediately looks at the Leander class and goes, what can I learn from them? And it's the lessons the Leander class teach which are most important to the Royal Navy, because it's those lessons which help show up in World War II. Jano, funny enough, one of the best novels by Douglas Newman features a fictional Leander class unit by the name of Andromeda. An excellent yarn, well read. Yes, there is, but I'm going to be recommending another book at the end. Daniel Freeman, an adventure and a refuser class for basing out of Malta might have been that they had advantage of a refuser class for basing out of Malta might have been that they had to use less fuel. Fuel or a big issue for supplying Malta. Not really as much less as you'd hope. The refuser engines ran hot and were modified. Basically, the refuser class are the cruisers which do their best to imitate the Manxman class and the Abdiels. Basically, the refuser class decides that they are cruisers, but they should be fast, and their engineers are some of the stories about the refuser class engineers and what they get away with, especially ones based on Malta, are quite worrying. Because it's, where do you find the stuff on Malta? You're under siege. William Cox, yeah, my SW frigate did AA training with the 538, and it was a windsock by an A4 across, by an A4 across our bows. Ouch. Vision. With the press, there is the same issue with railroads. Our new website for my rail group has a big and detailed Q&A section to help people, including reporters, on specifics of railroading. Yeah. Great. Desmond Weston is the guy who book over. I also recommend his book, but I can't find him out. The New Zealanders were good. If we go back quickly, Achilles, all the class had pretty much the same stats. So if we go to this one, they all had a range of roughly 5,730 nautical miles at 13 knots. Or roughly, again, it goes a little bit higher when it's at 10 knots, which, if you would compare it, would be sits bang on the money for the D class cruisers. So, Achilles is a fun one, but we're going to get into this one first. So, Achilles is, of course, most famous for the Battle of the River Plate. And this takes place on Wednesday, the 13th of December. And if you want some more information about the River Plate, I'll be getting into it during this video, and I'll get into it during the deep dive. But there's also a whole series called the River Plate 80, which is down on one of the lists on YouTube. I've got down below, and I've got a whole load of videos up there because I did it for the 80th anniversary of the Battle River Plate. I did a whole series, and it's down below. It's down there. Wesley Phillips, The Cruiser by Warren Toot is another good read using Leander's fictional HMS Antoine. Ask Antigone. Well, guess what? That was the one I'm going to be talking about, going to mention at the end. So, Wesley, thank you, and you have managed to jump and read my mind. That's cool. Trent McCartney, the Leanders look like scaled-down counties. That is in many ways what they were. The Royal Navy hadn't been building light cruisers up to this point, so they actually scaled down parts of the county class design to design the Leanders. That is what caused some of the issues, because it was found that actually how you build a heavy cruiser and how you build a light cruiser are not quite the same thing. Hi, Frederico Vego. Welcome back. Right. So, the Battle of the River Plate, you have Commodore Harwood, you have Captain Woodhouse on HMS Ajax, you have Achilles under the command of Captain Perry, and you have HMS Exeter under the command of Captain Bell. Now, there is a reason why Harwood sends off Exeter to do the reconnaissance, because the whole point of any attack was to always divide and split up. And it was always going to be the 2 6-inch cruisers on one side and the 8-inch cruiser on the other. That was his policy. It was a destroyer-style thing of, instead of keeping in line and engaging while you attack, and sort of going line of battle, gunnery duel, it was a case of split your fire and gunnery duel. Because if you can't concentrate your guns on us and can't go gung gung gung, and you have to divide your fire, that's going to make us more effective, because when you divide an enemy's guns, you not only divide their firepower, you multiply the problems for their targeting. Okay? So we all know when you're using visual targeting methods and you're using basically the Mark 1 eyeball as your primary sensor and brain as the primary computer, yes, you have all these lovely sighting systems, sighting aids, and all these lovely, complicated, lovely systems of mirrored glass and visual identification systems that allows you to see out and measure the distance and get your range. But you're going to make it far more complicated if you manage to split those up, because it's pre-radar. You can't on a lovely map work out how far away these people are accurately. Even radar, it's a bit iffy, but in World War II, it's far less iffy than when you've got a visual rangefinder and you're going there, and we got that one there, because you haven't got two and able to average it out. Because you've got this one concentrating on them, and this one concentrating on them. And this is the whole point. The RN squadron was sailing northeasterly course at the time, and Admiral Grass Bay, under Captain Langsdorff, was on a sort of southwest course. Generally southwest, but for some reason, he seems to have been sort of zigzagging at the time of the battle. Now, this could well have been him doing a reconnaissance, because you have to remember at this point, he no longer has, and this is one of the interesting debates, the Arados have stopped working. The 196s, which the Grass Bay carries, have stopped working. He starts off with 2. He no longer, and by this point of the battle, he no longer has either in working condition. In fact, they are both useless. In contrast, Harwood has lots of them which are working available to him. The trouble is they're going to have fun with communications, but we'll get in. We won't really bother about that today. Jeff Ealer, the air fusers could accelerate to top speed faster than any other cruisers, even if the speed was not faster. Also turn tight on other cruisers, pretty much, but they're also their engineers like to develop them. Dirt Squad, my fluffy research assistant is currently holding onto my toes. It's cute, except for a history of bouts of hyperviolence. See, I'm lucky. Mine doesn't do that. Mine just occasionally, literally tries to will try and give you. He has this habit. I'm trying to sort of not train him out of too hard because he likes to sometimes try and lick our nose when to say hello. Occasionally does it when he's eating, when we're eating, and sort of going, no, go out. Frigivere. Also, did the 6-inch guns work as or should work on paper? They were actually used for anti-aircraft fire, and on the Aerofusers in the Mediterranean, as part of Force K, did some quite good work. As part of the Leanders, we don't really have much history of them being used, but we do know that the 8 inches and the 6 inches were used in their air role and scared the bejesus out of the Americans on occasion because they were just watching as the guns just went up and started firing, and they were going, you guys do realize that they are not AA guns. They are AA guns. We have the rangefinders. We have the information. You sure about this? That goes up so high. That goes up high. Basically, it was extra tonnage to make the turrets do that, but it was worth it. Didn't mean to read your mind, just have a couple copies of it in my library. Cool. I mean, I don't mind people reading my mind. It would make life easier. Let's see. I will now think very hard about a pizza arriving for dinner and see if anyone reads my mind. Doesn't appear to be working. But reading my mind about books, that's fine. It depends. There are differing accounts, but I do, as far as I understand, I know there's a whole debate going on between the various people going, it works in theory, but not in reality. It was used in reality, and it's one of the interesting things. It doesn't work against dive bombers. No, it doesn't. But when you're talking about dealing with the Italian Air Force, who occasionally do this weird high-level bombing things and all these sort of things, it does work. And occasionally, when they manage to have 6 or 8 inch flak shells, which do occasionally appear, not always, but do occasionally appear at various points through weird means, they get used quite a lot. Anyway, to the battle. And Carl, this seems to be a recurring early World War II theme. The radar turned off. Was this German RN policy? Neither side had radar at this point in all their ships. Well, actually, the German case in any ship, really. And in the British, weren't enough ships, so these ships didn't have radar. And that was sort of working. Or at all, I think. No. And Richard Hughes, what was the most intelligent tactic the RN used to stop the Graf Spey? Well, honestly, it was putting the ships where the Graf Spey could go to actually get a big kill, because the dirty little secret of what Harwood worked out is Graf Spey's been down here all these months. So far, it hasn't really made a big kill. It hasn't really achieved anything. It's been achieving a lot of psychological warfare, but nothing really spectacular. It's going to have to go home soon. So where's it able to go and make a big kill in my area? The River Plate is the best place to go and make a big kill, because not anyone and no one there is really strong enough to stop them if they start doing it. Right then, so here is the Battle of River Plate, and I'm going to expand this and start this again because I don't want to lose the timing. Now, we're going to deal with the first part of the Battle of River Plate, so pretty much don't up until the Graf Spey turns east. No, west. I've managed to flip it around. I flipped it around on my screen. Hopefully, it's the right way around for you. Until the grass bay turns west, we don't have to worry about it too much. Then we'll move on to that bit. But as you can see, there is quite a lot of firing going on, and they are drawing fire. And one of the issues that I often get from people is to go, "Oh, the 6-inch guns couldn't cause any damage." Not to the armoured parts of the Graf Spee, but a lot of it isn't armoured. A lot of it is exposed. And they certainly do cause damage to those. If they hadn't been able to cause any damage and hadn't been a threat with their torpedoes, the Graf Spee could have just kept going once it managed to knock out Exeter. And let's be honest, it does knock out Exeter. Exeter has lost pretty much everything by the end of the battle. She's got nothing working. Leander and Achilles and Ajax, managed to shoot so much and so fast that they actually stripped the paint off their barrels, and in one case, deform their barrels. Now, to deform a gun barrel is very, very hard work, but that shows you what level of charges they're using, and B, how much they're firing, that they managed to do this stuff. And they do have a big impact on the Graf Spee. The Graf Spee is absolutely scared of them. And it is. Because in many ways, Harwood achieves a psychological dominance because of the way he attacks. Because in the Graf Spee's mind, in the mind of Langsdorff and most of the German officers, we have an 11-inch gun Deutschland class. Call it a heavy cruiser, as I do. There are many people who use other terms, but I will use a heavy cruiser. In their world, with such guns, such firepower, these small ships could not be behaving so aggressively. They should form up around Exeter and they should be concentrating. And actually, there is a good argument for saying that he actually thinks that Exeter is an Arethusa class, not Exeter, at one point, and he thinks they're 2 destroyers he's facing. And, well, the only destroyers with that sort of profile of guns 4.5 will be tribal class destroyers. So he must think he's facing tribal class destroyers and HMS and one of the Arethusa class. He's actually facing Exeter and 2 Leanders. And they really do go aggressive. They go very, very aggressive. And as you can see, they are also automatically diverging and trying to do mirrored courses. Exeter gets concentrated on because she is the bigger threat. You have to admit that the 8-inch shells can do more damage. But the fact is, those 6-inch shells are doing enough damage to dog her. And cause damage to things like water pipes, some of the damage which the Graf Spee receives, desalination plants knocked out, water treatment plants knocked out, all the sort of thing. Well, they're basically the same thing, but they're there. Damage to her rangefinders, damage to all sorts of things which are outside of the armored area of the ship, are damaged mostly by 6-inch fire because they're firing a lot longer and they're doing this damage. And in some cases, they seem to have damaged the hull because some of the reports from the Uruguayan authorities afterwards suggest some of the shell holes, which they do see, do not fit with being an 8-inch gun and do not fit with being fired from the side. Because, again, this is going to sound strange. If you believe some of the idea that's put forward is that the only shells which do damage to the Graf Spee are the 8-inch ones, which are fired by Exeter, means all the firing damage is done in the first part of the battle, and all the holes on both sides and all angles are managed to be done by her, which doesn't really fit with how the battle plays out and what's actually visible to her at any one time. Basically, again, when we're just quickly getting back into the AA debate, the thing that's understood in the 1930s and the 1920s about aircraft and AA is it's not just hitting to kill. If you're able to put up a barrage, the enemy has to avoid it. If you're able to put up a flak barrage, they have to either go through it, which could take them out. They may survive it, but they might not. It will cause damage. And the thing is, aircraft are fragile enough. Aircraft are fragile enough that it's kind of like the surface raider issue. You cause any damage to a surface raider, it's knocked out. A surface raider is only strong as long as it's able to get repaired. If it can't get repaired, it's knocked out. It's the same with aircraft. If they get damaged, it's as good as a kill. So yes, you might not take them out with your 6-inch or 8-inch gunfire, but you will certainly put them off. You might well create a no-fly area. You might well do things which stop them being able to line up their target properly. So all these things matter, and you might do enough damage, conversely, that will knock them out eventually. They won't get back or to base or this sort of thing. So it's not about shoot to kill. It's about shoot to deter and shoot to damage. It's a different thing. And it's if you concentrate purely on a weapon's ability to kill the enemy, you miss out so much of what the capability you could have, and that could provide you with security. All right. Really, 6-inch guns versus something like grassing might not sink breaking Citadel, but can render combat effective, which is pretty much what they did do. Jeff Beeler, wasn't Harwood too far out of verse? Better shooting once he moves in. That is certainly a big scene in the movie, but it was her intention was to move in. It takes time, though, to move in. This is the thing. It's speed, and she turns around and you're trying to get in there. Alex Hunt is using the phrase pocket battleship. That's a newspaper talk. Dear Casso, Jones felt that the 8-inch guns could not damage the Bismarck. The Baron discovered that this was not the case. Hard to concentrate on a German fire control officer with a shed load of 6-inch guns firing at you and intermittently hitting you while you try to direct split fire. That is the whole point of their tactics. Jeff Hill, Grasso was an armored ship, its own sort of thing, vulnerable to 6-inch guns. Yeah. Alzaski and someone else as well has also written this same thing. No. Back. Abzaski has written Grasmay had 80mm, 50mm on side belt plus 40mm on barbettes. And Federico Vega, 140mm main turrets, main belt, 3.9-inch, 1.8-inch, 2.8-inch. Yeah. So that's being both written in metric and imperial. Thank you very much. Federico, what could the 6-inches penetrate? Well, at closer range, they could penetrate definitely the thinner side belt, and they were able to penetrate some of the unarmored areas quite easily as well. And Admiral Grasso was fitted with Seacat radar. I don't think it was working at this point, and honestly, Seacat tact radar is not something I would trust in the beginning of World War II. Actually, at any point, it seems to have very interesting time. In William Cox, take on the ship's fire mains, and you've hurt its walk-making ability, which they did do. Richard, they damaged diesel fuel. Oil proofiness was most important. Graspay could not go home without machine shop repairs. Yep. And Jackson and Achilles could mission kill Graspay for sure, which is what they were trying for. Ronan Cash, in using the 11-inch turrets on separate targets, was one of the turrets having to use a secondary turret-mounted rangefinder? So, was this not as good as the primary one? As I understand it, yes. Anyone else getting freezes? William Cox, I hope not. As far as I know, it's not freezing. It's not telling me of any dropped frames. Ronan Cash, smooth for me. Good. Glad to hear that. Some of the Admiral Graf Space 11-inch did not explode while over-penetrating, and the Exeter kept on sailing, occasionally fired the last remaining turret. Those must have been really frustrating to both ships. Yes. Carl Gasman, refire correct. Rommel advised to fire machine guns on enemy tanks, kept them buttoned up. Yeah. Samuel, pocket battleship is a cool term. I would down say it's cool, but not accurate. I remember Alex said that even they even got to 8,000 yards or less. They did. They get to a very, very close range. Jeff, what are warships colors people's perceptions on naval fighting because it's fighting to death all the time? William Cox, Panzer Chief armored ship. That is how I treat them. I tend to treat them as sort of heavy cruisers more than when I'm classifying them. Dirt Squad, the idea of AA fire is to force virtual attrition. If you cause the enemy pilot to either miss or abandon the attack, you've caused the enemy to waste resources, and all war is ultimately economics. Agreed. And as I said, this is the point. This is something which gets missed in the current debate, especially when it's the debate about missiles. Oh, it's got to kill. Well, that's the thing. The missile does have to kill because it costs so much. But if you can add your missile defense to a flak wall and have a wall of flak that the enemies also get through, that makes it very interesting. And it's like when you're dealing with hypersonic missiles, they're going so fast. How are we going to intercept them? Well, if you can see them coming long enough away, which with a Doppler radar you probably can tell they're coming long enough away, you could set up a flak wall, which they then will have to fly through. And the odds are they'll get hit by something. And trust me, if something's going at that speed, anything it gets hit by is going to cause a lot of damage because of the amount of kinetic energy involved. Sarah, while what the Germans called it, it's a very generic term, isn't it? Yep. Jeff Phillip, did anyone use the 70 degrees elevation for plunging far? Not during the Battle of River Plate. I know, Sarah, without the treaty system, would 8-inch heavy cruisers be quite so relevant? And that's an interesting question. And it's one which is very worth bearing in mind for the Leander class because they are used so often. They are 6-inch cruisers in many ways the proto 6-inch cruiser for the Royal Navy as it evolves its 6-inch cruiser into World War II. It's an interesting question. I think I think in many respects that the idea certainly would have had the heavy cruisers could have, if there hadn't been a limit to an 8-inch gun, could have got far bigger. I don't think the small cruiser would have got more than a 6-inch gun. I don't think the light cruiser would have ever been more than a 6-inch. But so would have never been sort of more powerful than Leanders. But I wouldn't have a feeling if the 8-inch hadn't been a limitation on a heavy cruiser, if they hadn't been limited, they could have got a lot heavier guns. And would they have been better off more with 6-inch cruisers? That is what the Royal Navy decides and what the Royal Navy does. So no zebra. Thank you for that one. Read 6-inch penetration. Individual arm plate can take a shell. The second one might penetrate. That's why you have the 6-inch. It fires enough. Second Wilson. Intermittent freezes picture, but not audio. Ooh, I have no idea what's going on. Could be YouTube. It was 3-1. Knock out one ship, but you still got two firing you. It was one heavy cruiser versus one heavy cruiser and two light cruisers. British had the advantage, not the pocket battleship. That is often what's forgotten about the Battle of River Plate, and that's the entire Royal Navy strategy. We'll be strong where we need to be strong, and when you arrive, hello! We brought friends. You're on your own? Oh, don't worry. That means there's plenty of dance partners for you. Want to dance? You don't want to dance? Well, we want to dance, so you will dance. And the thing is, the Grass Bay couldn't outrun any of them. It had been at sea for too long. It was not able to get that speed. They were going to give up. They just don't close with it because, honestly, they've taken a bit of a battering as well. And it gets into Montevideo. And Trent McCartney, do you think the reason Langsdorff accepted the fight is that he wanted to give the British a black eye before heading home? Accepting a 3 versus 1 fight never seems like he accepts it because he can't run away. He manages to limp away after a fight, but at first he doesn't think he thinks he's fighting a light cruiser and 2 destroyers. And even that is sort of a case of why are you accepting a fight? Because if you are fighting 2 tribal destroyers and a light cruiser, here's the thing. Those Royal Navy commanders and the Royal Navy as a whole will probably accept the loss of a destroyer or loss of both destroyers and a light cruiser for taking out the Grass Bay. It'll be painful, but they'll accept it because they have more to start off with. Race Car Meerkat, hello. You make it sound like BJJ. Make your opponent tired. I'm not sure what BJJ stands for, but yeah, probably. Dr. Clark, getting close range. In the Battle of the River Plate, Nelsonian Leander class laughs at the idea of close range where you can't reach out and hit them with your cutlass. Yeah, that's close range. The Akasu, armor penetration for 6-inch 50 Mark 22 was 76 millimeters at 12,500 yards. Anyone got other figures? There are various figures, but I don't agree with all of them. Jerison, someone's been plating Battlestar Galactica Deadlock with the flak walls of Doom on Colonial Battlestars. Look, I have a reason for playing this. Bilge Pumps could be doing a special for NavyCon coming up, and it will be using Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. So both me and Drac have had to get it because Jamie had the game originally and was loving it. So we've got it, and we are steadily getting used to its metrics before we start discussing it. And I do like the flak wall, but I've always liked flak walls, and now I've got ships which actually put up a flak wall. And also, I can honestly confirm that if you have a fleet which is built around 4 battle stars, there is really not much which can get close to you. Bijan, any cruiser can be a pocket battleship if it's impressive enough in the media. The bigger ship you got and you use to promote it like battleship, then it's a pocket battleship. And this is Neptune. So I'll just finish off these questions, then I'll get to Neptune. I'll restart Neptune. Dope Squad, the other issue with hypersonic missiles is even a glancing hit will probably cause such a rapid change in altitude that the avionics will struggle to cope. Probably. Run Cash, would 6-inch be aimed for the superstructure and bridge, or was that level of accuracy not realistic? That was what they were aimed for, and it was realistic. Paul from Chicago, the logic of the 6-inch cruiser really needs a 10,000 ton limit on the heavy cruisers. Not really, because you see, if you have the 10,000 ton limit, yes, that makes sense. But at a certain point, if you are trying to build a lot of cruisers, building them much more than 10, the heavy cruisers might end up about 14,000, 15,000 tons. But if you've still got overall treaty limitations, I was sort of thinking about it in the 8-inch and they're being limited. You've got a treaty limitation of displacement in sort of a total tonnage limitation in terms of mass. Then frankly, yeah, I don't see your only problem comes if there are no treaty limitations at all on the cruisers. And if there are no treaty limitations at all on cruisers, then you probably end up with an entire fleet of C, D, and E class with equivalent sort of thing, about 12,000 tons with 9.2-inch guns. Jeff Healer, Italy and France built cruisers similar to Leanders for the same reason, pretty much. Ten Freeman, the 8-inch shells might be more likely to badly hurt an enemy ship like a cruiser or even battleship, but 6-inch, but the 6-inch is probably fine for use against cruisers, destroyers, merchants. Yeah, it's perfectly fine for what it needs to kill. In-car, was the deployment of RN 8-inch and 6-inch cruisers very different, as the losses of light cruisers and smaller cruisers seem much higher than the counties? Mainly because there are so many more of them deployed, and they tend to get deployed in terms of the riskier places. So there are a lot more to be deployed. They run higher risks, and the heavies are mostly used in the supporting roles, whereas you might well have the lights in the front line. This is December 1939. 2 months of war. Yep. Race Car Maker. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Be mean and don't let your opponent inhale. Yes. Ron Cash, any idea what top speed of the not paddle battleship was by River Plate? They don't seem to get much faster than... There are different accounts, but let's put it this way. We'll get to this in the last phase of the sort of the second phase of the battle and the chase in a bit, but it's not as fast by any stretch of imagination as it started out the war. Richard Hughes, off topic, which is better, HMS Hood or HMS King George V? Honestly, I'd prefer HMS Warsprite. Drayrishan, not sure if you could get it on Discord, but you can watch all non-Ron Moore's Reimagined Battlestar Galactica on BBC iPlayer. For free on the basis that you pay your license fee. Yeah. Galsvansky, ground speed could do 28.5 knots. HMS Achilles could do 32.5 knots. No chance of ground speed to run away during the day. Yeah, and she wasn't at 28.5 knots at all at this point. I think she was down closer to 24 knots, if not less, as her effective top speed, because her hull was fouled up. I know, Zara. I've got RTWT2, but in RTW1, I mainly just go for big projected cruisers with enough to bully other protected cruisers. And enough to run one more cruisers. Sensible. Also, even though the Leanders were not the perfect design, what were the other navies building in comparison? Not that much different to the Leanders. Jeff Beeler, how are torpedoes used by Leanders? Mostly to scare other people and occasionally to sink ships, but more often than not, they were used to sink ships which were already sinking and to stop them. Right. So, HMS Neptune. Well, Neptune's a fun name to have, but she's ordered on 2nd of March 1931, laid down 24th of September 1931, launched 31st of January 1933, and commissioned 23rd of February 1934. And she's part of the South Atlantic Station almost from the beginning. It's really kind of a sad thing that the other two light cruisers, the other two sisters, get to be involved in the Battle of the River Plate, which is the most significant action, arguably, in the experience of the South Atlantic Station. And Neptune, who's been out there since before the war began, a long time in the interwar period, doesn't. Just a case of cruelty to Neptune here. And she could have been. There was, at the time, she might well... there had been an idea to send her across to back up Harwood, so it could have been a case of him having 3 Leander-class cruisers there and HMS Exeter. Which would have been a really interesting thing. Actually, the most interesting scenario would have been if he'd had Cumberland, who managed to miss the Graf Spee twice, and all 3 Leander-class, because then the Graf Spee would have been dealing with 5 cruisers, and frankly, that would not have been a good battle for the Graf Spee. Any chance of it actually getting away would evaporate very quickly. I'd love to go over the 6 versus 8 logic sometime. Without treaty limitations, I think you end up with 9.2-inch cruisers armored against similar, with super tribals died with on the other end. I think that's what I sort of said. And I would go for super refusers. Tribal super refusers on the other end. Rather than Didos. I don't think you end up with the Didos with a 5.25-inch. I suppose it could come into the London 1930 treaty discussion, which we're planning on having, which I'm not sure if we're planning on having, but it's currently one of the options for Patron in October. So, the Battle of Sirte, which is where, of course, HMS Neptune is known for, and is, sadly enough, where she gets sunk after, well, in the second phase. As we discussed when we talk about Force K, she's one of the ships which are added onto Force K after it's been going successfully. And she ends up getting into trouble because it leads the group into a minefield. Now, that's not her fault, or her captain's fault, but there is an interesting scenario that she's slightly bigger than the refusers and slightly more likely to set off magnetic mines, therefore, than them. And it's one of the interesting things during World War II that the Italians have consistently got trouble setting mines right because when they're setting them for try and take out cruisers, which they do occasionally try and do, because the refusers are so much lighter compared to other cruisers that if you set it low enough for her, then they could end up getting them set off by destroyers. Which means that the destroyers will often set them up going at higher speed, which means they won't actually get taken out by the mines, and you'll lose your mines. So if you set them, usually, Leanders are about the lowest level they're setting the mines for. Angerson, was there any way to save the Grass Bay? Asking for a time-traveling German friend of mine. Not be in the South Atlantic, because there's also the moment they not actually engage in a fight in the River Plate, try and make it home and hope you don't get caught by Renown and Ark Royal, which are waiting slightly further north, going, hello, you coming to see us? Or the Caribbean, where they'd run into some American heavy cruisers, which just happened to be hanging out in the Caribbean at the time. All right, back in a second. Just going to close the window and quickly sort something. Not good. Sort forward. There you go. That's the book. Right. Yeah. Just in case we get into more discussion on the Arado 196. So, back there. All right, Alan. William Cox, armament limitations talk only work if your potential enemies agree them. Once Japan and Germany walked away from the treaties, there was no reason for any convention. Pretty much. Gone Eagle. Fittingly tragic how Admiral Spree was killed in South America, and then the ship named after him was also killed in South America. It's kind of Greek tragedy sort of thing. Yeah. Which is appropriate considering he's slain in part by Achilles and Ajax, which are, of course, named for Greek tragedies. Decision. Only Angus O'Sonnell. The only way would have been not starting the war in the first place. There was no way the Iron was sinking. Well. If she managed to thread back up the center of the Atlantic and managed to replicate Deutschland in managing to go really far north and then come down the coast of Norway, maybe she'd have made it, but I doubt it because the Royal Navy would have probably done to her what they did to Altmark. And there was no way she could pretend to be an innocent merchant ship. Go on, Eagle. There was no way Germany could have avoided nor won World War II. They could have avoided World War II. They're the ones who started it. And then, if they not started it, then they would have avoided it. Night Heron Productions. Nice to see the good old Leanders getting some love. They are good, much loved. But you have to recognize their limitations and their strengths. And they do have limitations and strengths. Neptune is a good example of this. The fact is that they are strong because they're flexible and fast, but they are oceanic cruisers, I would argue. And that's the thing. When you're talking about fighting in the Mediterranean, that's why the Arafusers and to an extent the Didos are actually the better units. And your town class, to an extent, replace your counties because they're your more flexible, heavy units. which sounds strange, but the town class become the heavy units in certain operations and fill the heavy cruiser roles. And the Arafusers are the light cruiser role. And the trouble is, the Leanders aren't really heavy or light. They don't really fit into either category for fighting in fulfilling a role in Mediterranean and other theaters, which they do find themselves use. Sea Cat Radar. It was good for night or fog navigation. Maybe you have an idea whether your ship is in bad visibility, but far from providing a firing solution. Yeah. And that's if it's working, not being at sea for months on end and not getting fired at. Paul from Canada. It's Canon 9.2 argument though. If the Germans were able to do 11-inch and the Americans 12, what does the rate of fire look like versus Showick? Because I think you send out 5-inch Dido Raiders. No, you'd probably send out 6-inch Raiders, annoying the British, because 6-inch can carry enough shells to do the raiding, and merchant ships aren't getting any use rougher. This is why I say the 6-inch survives. But I would argue that if you're going to be dealing with the others, you're going to look at it and go, well, are they going to be what level of... If you've got 12-inch armed battleships, i.e. Alaskas, not 12-inch armed cruisers, i.e. Alaskas, then what level of inch are your battleships carrying? Because if you think about it, your heavy cruiser is limited to 8-inch. Your battleship is limited to 16-inch, which is twice that. If you've got 12-inch armed cruisers becoming a common thing, what level are your battleships going to be? That's the problem. Orion. Seriously, why? Why did they pick these names? Just so I don't get it wrong. Now, Orion was a giant huntsman whom Zeus, possibly Artemis, places amongst the stars as, well, how do I put this? He is killed possibly by Artemis, possibly by a giant scorpion, and apparently he is blinded by the father of a woman he rapes. So really not a good person to be naming a ship after. And again, he appears in the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. Yeah. I don't know. And this, by the way, a gentleman has had 6. Well, no. How do I put this? 5 Royal Navy and 1 French ship's submarine named after him. 5 Royal Navy ships, including. But this was the last one. And I'm glad this was the last one, because honestly, definitely not a character I would like to check. Again, starts off with the home fleet, then goes to North American West Indies Station, also does some other things. Built by Her Majesty Dockyard, Devonport. You know, it's a fun time. She's a good ship, though, despite what her name's doing. Jeff Beeler, without treaties, the only limitation is value for money. Naval budgets are not infinite. Why Chile takes HMS Canada and cash rather than 2 Invincibles? Yep. Angus, I think so. The rest of Europe would not tolerate an expansionist, aggressive Germany, and Germany couldn't fight the rest of Europe and win. They couldn't sustain it. That's good. John Gonding, Montevideo was a much easier port to leave. Buenos Aires had a single narrow dredge channel to enter-exit. Montevideo was much more open. Theoretically, yes. Reality, the Royal Navy quite quickly closed it down, with the help of a lot of land-based spotters. Ian Carr, why did Graf Spade choose Montevideo rather than Buenos Aires, Argentina, as the latter was quite pro-German later in the war? As we just said. Carl Harmon, Dr. Clark. Hello, Carl Soros. How long would you give the grass bay before the superstructure would be saturated in a smash to bits? Let's put it this way. If she hadn't managed to get away when she had, and Night Fan had fallen when it had, probably wasn't going to be that much longer. Jeff Beeler, what med battles were the Leanders used for? Quite a few, actually. They did a fair number of the operations. If we consider Orion, she ends up in the Mediterranean 1940. She becomes the 7th Cruiser Squadron flagship for John Tovey. She takes part in the operations of Bardia, the Battle of Calabria, and the sinks things in the Deccanese Islands. She's at the Battle of Cape Matapan. She was in Crete and Aegean areas for those operations, and was damaged. And she spends her time, most of the time takes part in the invasion of Sicily, takes part in the Normandy landings. There's an argument over whether or not she fires, of course, the first shell in Normandy. And is involved in one of the Corfu Channel incidents in 1946. So yeah, she gets there. She does get Sicily, Salerno, Greece, Crete, Matapan, Malta convoys, Aegean, Anzio. Yeah. So Orion does get a lot of war service in, and is a good example of the class. They are around and they get involved. Mm-hmm. And Going on, Jim Heaton. The warlike elements in German society was not the Nazis. Remember, Germany. Golden Eagle. There are several people historians who would contest that, but I actually do not agree with them on the idea that Germany, even though it was essentially controlled by the Prussian Officer Corps, that is often overstating the power of the Prussian Officer Corps and exact power they had, and even had power. They don't have as much power as it's. They start to gain power at certain points, and people often use Hindenburg as an sort of example, but no. Nighthand Productions. Forgive me if I'm rather late to this show. We'll have to watch what's harder. Have you talked about a subclass of the Leander class, including the ships Sydney, Perth, and Hobart? No, I'm going to do another video on the amphibian class. Mythology is flexible, as Daniel Freeman's pointed out. Then, Jeff Beeler, we have not got to the Royal Australian event. Nope. Jermac, in some leaders Leanders, I've seen till now start off trickling down of battleship names from World War One into smaller ships due to small numbers of battleships being built. That was to an extent happening, yes. Bijan, the after battle report for Orion makes finding the wreck of him hard. I guess we'll just have to look up the sky. Just keep in mind, Mussolini came into power before Adolf, and there was Stalin. Conflict was going to come one way or another. Yes, and there's lots of other people as well who are also quite nasty going around the world at that time in the 1930s. Bijan, NASA's next deep space capsule is the Orion. Will be part of the Artemis program for the moon. Yeah, I'm not really sure about this one. I think they possibly need to do some renaming. And I would never classify myself as particularly woke or anything, but I would say Orion is not one I would be building for. I hate it when they name battle cruisers with battleship names. It's due to the rising importance of cruisers. Because cruisers are rising in status. Once you have the treaty system and you're not building as many battleships and you're not building as many of these capital ships, cruisers are the next level ship down, and you're building a lot more of them. They're rising in status, so they get the status names. Dev's God, because the Enlightenment moves focused on ancient Greek culture as the birth of European culture, a lot of aspects were incorporated in lots of European culture at the time. Yeah, can't even blame the French generally for acquired ships and reuse of Greek names. Anointis, the racial element of German right wing was present in World War I and earlier, Ludendorff famously being prominent in the early Nazi movement. Yeah, sadly enough. Paul Johnson, Thomas Clark. Thomas Slade has a lot to answer for. I thought he was responsible for most of the Greek names in the Royal Navy. Yeah, arguably. Ajax, built by Vickers Armstrong, Baron Furness, ordered the 1st of October 1932, laid down 7th of February 1933, launched 1st of March 1934, commissioned 12th April 1935. The point is, she was 4 years old when World War II began. And you can also argue that by World War II, she was to an extent out of date and outclassed by some of the ships appearing. So that's how fast the architecture and naval engineering was moving. Literally, while she was being built and commissioned, there were newer and better ships being built, namely the Town class. Roland Cash, is it anachronistic to expect the Leanders to spend a lot of wartime covering carriers? Is it? It is anachronistic to expect that. They do spend some time at the war with carriers, but honestly, they are not the carrier covers. They do not spend a lot of time around the carriers. In fact, you're more often to find usually at the beginning of the war, destroyers and secondary cruisers around the carriers. By the end of the war, you've got primary cruisers around the carriers. Danny Freeman, Golding. I believe there's some comment by you is I think we want to be careful about comparing things to German National Socialists of the 1920s and 1940s. Okay? I will support my admins there because I'm sure Daniel's right. Derp Squad, Golden Eagle. As a person studying populism and populist politics, your position is worryingly close to that often promoted by many Nazi apologists. Yeah, be very careful with some of the history of Nazi Germany and the stuff around it. There is a lot of stuff. One interesting thing is about the Weimar Republic is it is quite such an open society in that so many things are legalized and free to do and open and part of it. It's considered beautiful and liberal by so many. And there are some undertones in it, but there aren't as much power for the Prussian officer corps as some people wouldn't like to make out. And I actually read a book one year which actually suggested that the reason for the rise of the Nazis was because it was a reaction to how liberal the Weimar Republic was. And I thought, that's a lovely thesis, but that's twaddle. The whole Nazism comes out of, to an extent, a reaction of World War I and the world changing, and someone offering a very simple, very one-dimensional answer to a very complicated problem. And to an extent, it's a product of the propaganda and things which had gone on in World War I and the effect they had on the populace and the way World War I had been handled afterwards. And also some of the issues which come up around that. But it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. And I'm more a naval historian. There are actual historians who specialize in this and could do it a far better justice and far more in depth than I can. Give me engineering history, give me ships and naval warfare, and I can do that. I would also say that the Prussian military tradition can be overblown quite a lot. There is a lot of revisionist attempts on that one. William Cox, escorting the carriers defines a lot of World War II cruisers. Mostly, it defines to an extent what they can do, but cruisers do a lot of independent operations. And you have to remember that the carriers are usually operating in task groups, and often actually it's more the battleships escorting them than the cruisers, because there is an idea that the cruisers can deal with most of the stuff that the battle carriers, aircraft, etc., can deal with most things cruiser level and below, and the destroyers can to an extent. But it's the battleships which are the scary things, and that's in the Mediterranean. You often find the battleships going around with the carriers, and occasionally you have to order the aircraft carrier to not engage because she's going, enemy, no, get back, but I'm in the battle line. Get out of the battle line. You're an aircraft carrier, not a battleship. Whole section of Battle of Cape Manapan is basically Cunningham ordering an aircraft carrier out of the battle line. Jeffy Allen, Ajax pronounced, according to Drac. Maybe, but Ajax. But Don Freeman agreed. I wish the SSNs weren't named for states, but rather famous submarines. Tang, Silverside, Halibut. Yeah, but that doesn't get us much political support, does it, when they're being built? It's like the Royal Navy naming the Type 26 Town class. How to guarantee they get built? Anyone want to cancel those ship names? Anyone want to lose all the be able to have that be dredged up as the politics for in the next general election? You cancelled that. You don't care about this city. You cancelled the ship name for it. Town class cruisers example. Jason, I would argue Nazism was so supported because it brought Germany out of a massive recession and gave out so much work that it was considered impossible. I would argue that is to an extent also it. Carl Guzman, risking moderation. An NSD here was also an answer of a Red Terror. A communist turned Weimar would have been also a bad place. That is also part of the problems. There's a reaction to communism. There's all sorts of reaction. Von Papen was an interesting character. He was charged with terrorism in the US for his involvement with sabotage operation, most notably the Black Tom accident, which when a munition ship depot was blown up. That's got Dr. Clark. The result of changing othering in-group outgoing politics, scapegoating, and calling back to a romanticized and idealized view of the past. To an extent. Right, so let's go to the second phase of the battle. William Cox, Doltros means nothing when you understand it was Ludendorff begging for the armistice. Ah, yes. Right then. So. As you can see, and I can't make the screen any bigger, unfortunately, but as you can see, as things go on, the actual Ajax and Achilles actually cross behind the track of Grass Bay. As she keeps trying to position herself to actually give them a broadside. And keeps failing because they're maneuvering. And it gets really, really close. At points, they drive the range down really, really close. There is various figures put on the map. I'm not going to quote because I don't know how. I'm not sure I believe how accurate they are. But in terms of miles, on the scale on the map, it gets down to about 2 miles. So a little over 3,000 yards. Probably less, actually. There are some reports that the range counter gets down to closer to 2,000 miles. 2,000 yards, I mean. Sorry. And it is an interesting battle. They are getting very close. And there is all this sort of thinking is pre-war, certainly, is that at such ranges, they should be being made mincemeat of. But the range, the speed of fire they're able to achieve, the concentration of fire they're able to achieve, all these things mean that actually, rather than being made mincemeat of, they are bamboozling the Graf Spee. The Graf Spee is sure she's dealing with by. It's kind of interesting. At the beginning of the battle, he's sure he's facing a light cruiser and 2 destroyers. By the end of the battle, it's almost like he's thinking he's been facing 3 heavy cruisers in some of the things that seems to be being talked about. In that the operation completely bamboozles Langsdorff and his command team. They've got so much fire coming down on them, and that's the point about a 6-inch gun. Its rate of fire is so much higher than that of the 8-inch gun that at ranges it can achieve a huge amount of impact, because that's high explosive keep hitting you. And yes, the first shell might not penetrate. The second shell might also not penetrate. But the third shell, the fourth shell hitting in a similar area, you've got a lot of problems. And yes, you can go, well, they're not that accurate. They're only hitting us with their shells 5 or 6% of the time, or 10% of the time. But if their rate of fire is 3 or 4 times you, and they are firing 400, 500, one of the main reasons they pull back is they are literally running out of shells by the end of the battle. And honestly, that's the real problem. They are running out of shells. You have an idea of how many shells they're firing. And if you're firing that quantity of shells, then your 10% chance of scoring a hit goes up quite a lot. And if you're aiming for the same areas, your chance of penetrating and causing a lot of damage is difficult. And the thing is, the reason I call it Ajax, and I'm just going to get to that point, is because the British sailors pronounce it as they saw it, and I'm going with the sailors' pronouncement, rather than occasionally the officers who were obsessive with Greek Enlightenment, ancient Greek, and the Enlightenment. In which case they might well have gone Ajax, but yeah, Ajax is how I think it was pronounced by sailors. And before anyone asks, yes, they did have cutlasses at this point still. They still had swords and rifles and guns. And, they could have, if they got closer. Were they able to restock shells? They had facilities down in the Falkland Islands where they would often have depot ships come in down there they could restock. And that's actually what Cumberland was down doing. She was down doing a self-ship refit, and there were various facilities there. But it was restocking shells at sea would have been an interesting one to have tried at this time. Calm guys, 6-inch, 3rd and 4th could penetrate the ship and on fire, and the 11th inch, as good as a kill chain, did not give effective range advantage needed for panzer ships to be viable in combat. Yep, a speed and range were not as useful for the 11-inch. Decision. And if you're down to 3,000 yards, your chances of hit are a lot higher than 10%. Yes, especially when you have Royal Navy cruiser. Honestly, let's be honest. At 3,000 yards for a Royal Navy cruiser, you've got to point blank range. This is the point. This point, you are getting to. You're talking about point blank ranges, and this is what they're getting into. So also the penetration ability of your 6-inch shell goes way up at 3,000 yards. William Cox, one of my fantasy novels is Beyond Shabbat Lives. The name is how the officers who advised the film pronounce it. Jeff Healer, what sort of war would you say the Leanders had? They seem to spend much of the late war in refit or repair for combat damage. One also ties Warspite for battle honors. Yes, that's Orion. Orion doesn't tie... Well, let's put it this way. Warspite technically has higher battle honors, but Orion and Hms Nubian and another destroyer. I think it's... Oh, let me just remember. It's HMS Jervis. Are all free joints out of thing. Interesting thing is, again, I would go actually if you were doing it fairly, and you basically said right then, like with a battleship, the moment it's in engagement, it's a battle, and therefore we're going to consider it battle honors. Then honestly, you would probably find that Warspite would get beaten by, well, probably by Orion, definitely by Nubian, and most likely by Jervis. And in fact, the actual figures would then turn around to Nubian, Jervis, Orion, Warspite. But they're not. They're not done that way. They're done for ships below battleships. They get campaigns. Hence, some of the battle honors for Orion are Atlantic 1939, Mediterranean 1940, 43 and 44, Malta Convoys 1941, Aegean 1944, Anzio 1944, Normandy 1944, and South France 1944. It's what happens. Second Wilson, according to Drac, it depends on which area of Greece you're in, whether it's Ajax or AX. Minor side letter J did not exist in ancient times. Yes, this is why we probably pronounced Jesus wrong. Dev Squad, I think Altmark had extra ammunition, but she'd already started heading back. Yeah, and again, the ammunition Altmark carries and transferring across is kind of an interesting debate. One ancient Greek name we got wrong is Circe. Should probably be pronounced Kake. At some point, I just give up. Yeah. Decision. To use a boxing analogy, the 6'10" Agraf Spey let a pair of Floyd Mayweathers get him in onto the ropes and couldn't block the punches. Pretty much. And this is what happens afterwards. It's a chase. It's come out now, so I'll use it. And carta number 10 del Service Rico de la Marina. Interesting enough, this chart is in the British National Archives in the post-war battle write-up, but seems to come from the sources and from my memory, is provided by Uruguay. And hence it's on Uruguayan time and all these things. And it's where the ships are seen, what details are available, and how the chase goes. And pretty much they head in an almost straight line. They are firing, though, at each other. And the Grass Bay goes into Montevideo Harbor. And you can also see the various channels that are available to it. Okay. Captain Seafort, rebattle honors. If every time they engage, surely wouldn't it be a battle flag class? Probably not. Believe it or not every convoy actually had a fight to get back across the Atlantic, and not every flag class ended up in a fight with anything. It is one of those things. We often we talk about the convoy war, we talk about the convoys which fight, but not all convoys actually get engaged. Cox, I read in translation the writers that come across the gap of years and languages best are Astaphanes, Raphaelis, and Solensi. Dev Scott, my toes have been recaptured. I will continue to provide updates. Good luck. Jebiela, how did the late war Leanders mount their 40mm? 2 times 4 and 4 times 2? Were torpedoes always carried? Torpedoes were carried for most of the war, I think, the whole way through the war, is what I'd argue. There's some debates about whether or not some of them landed. But it is mostly they have 2-pounders fitted first instead of the catapults, and then later on they get more added on as time goes on. Basically, they get added as they can do. Anyway, so let's do some summary of them quickly, because it is now 8:15. I realise I've been keeping you here for quite a while. So, trade protection. They did fleet protection. Don't forget HMS Antinine of Warren Toots the Cruiser, because that's rather a cool book, and it's rather an interesting one if you haven't seen it. I got it on Kindle, so I haven't got a book to show you. They were Generation 1 of the Cruiser reset. Other classes that came after them are products of them. And I have a lovely picture by Frank Norton, which comes from the New Zealand archives of New Zealand there, up in the corner, which it makes a suitable thing for me to talk about this, because okay, I often have fun with the Leander class because I can seem like I'm negative on them. And actually, they're very good for the reset. They are an excellent class for reset. They have some belt armor. There are debates about how much, and it does seem to go down, but there is some argument they have quite thick belt armor, some argument they have no belt armor. Most of the reports I see sort of, if I'm going to go into the subject of belt armor, I would go to this very nice ship in the book, my Whitley book, and get a look at it from this. And I'd have to see, let's see, Leander class protection. They have 3-inch armor over the machinery spaces, 3.5-inch on the side, 2-inch on the magazines, 1-inch decks, and 1-inch turrets. And there's a debate over exactly their line out and where they're lined and put out. Interesting enough, the Aerofuser class protection is 2.5-inch on the machinery spaces, 3-inch on the sides, 2-inch on the crowns, and 1-inch on the deck. So they actually have thinner armor, but yeah. And interesting enough, the Aerofusers are closer in weight to what the Leanders were supposed to be originally. The whole point is, how do I put this? The Leander class are these cruisers which are built when the Royal Navy's working out how to build light cruisers. Then it works out how small it can build them with the Aerofusers and goes, this is great, this is going to give us numbers. But hang on, neither of these classes can do what we need them to do in terms of the surface rating role. They are replacements for the Ds and the Cs. They aren't replacements for the Es. And to an extent, the Ds with their longer range. So they are all they give birth to what is called what becomes a town class. You know, the town class. You have to start looking at the Royal Navy The biggest impact of the treaties is the condensement of cruisers down into two categories, light and heavy. Prior to that, there had been battle, armoured, scout, protected, all sorts of different levels of cruiser to cover all the various myriad of missions that the cruiser had to do. I would argue that whilst in the heavy cruisers you get a very much a standardized form, 8-inch, built as close to 10,000 tons as possible. We're all building this, what is basically an armored cruiser replacement. That's the heavy cruiser. But the levels below that, scout cruiser, the protected cruiser, all the duties and these things they do, they still need to be done. And you need cruisers for them. And the thing is, that's where you get the differences in size of light cruisers, to cover the different missions. So I would argue that the Leanders are in many ways a retake on the light cruiser as a protected cruiser. The trouble is they're not protected enough to be like the town class and to really do that role. And they're not light enough to really be used as a scout cruiser. I'd say that's the Arifusers and the Tribals which sort of fit that role. So that's their problem. They're a good reset, but they don't fit really into any of the categories which they're needed to fit into. They can do everything in a sort of 60% way. Dev Squad. A lot of convoys were directed around the U-boats using cover such as bad weather or such like. Most of the convoy commanders and captains were told about the intelligence that made decisions. Weren't told about the intelligence that made decisions. Yep. Paul Boswick. Some of the NTBs based in the channel must have been involved in plenty of skirmishes. Again, they were a few, but not as many as sometimes the movies would like that. Take care, old Richard. Must be off chow. Calm Gasman, Danny Freeman. If the Central Powers won World War I, now you could try SMS. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name. Capsule Samaya? Decision, which is why I love humanity so. That people don't change that much, according to Daniel Freeman. Pretty much. For that reason, I'll continue to send my time travel teams back to prevent such a thing happening. If we had time travel teams, that'd be quite cool. Derp Squad. I see. There was a gentleman's agreement between a lot of the launchers that there was sent out on search and rescue for pilots to not engage or report each other to their respective commands. That doesn't surprise me. Doug Clark, probably a question for the Arifuser class discussion, but did the RAN make a mistake going for the Anders Arifusers rather than waiting for Town class? They didn't make a mistake. They went for the best available at the time when they needed to build the cruisers. This is the point. You go with the best available when you're ordering it, and when you're ordering it, they go for the Amphion class. For Vega, they are good enough ships. That's correct. Jennifer, if those figures are correct, then the Leanders had similar armor thickness to the Graf Spee, so that might make the Graf Spee a large light cruiser. There are many arguments for what the Graf Spee is, but I do not agree with the phrase of calling it a pocket battleship. It was a heavy cruiser. I'm going to go with that with its 11-inch guns. In Clark, Town class cruisers were in reality heavier than many RN heavy cruisers. They were the RN's heavy cruiser of choice for an They were so. As I've said this before, and Daniel Freeman likes to put in the message, they were not surface raiders, Gov. Honestly, not. They're just anti-surface raiders, and they've been built such good as anti-surface raiders. They actually have the profile of a surface raider. Yeah, that was the town class. And see, the thing is, the Leanders aren't big enough to do that role. So then you go, well, are you small enough to be used as a scout cruiser? Are you small enough to be expendable? Not really. Oh. So where are you going to be? You're being a trade protection cruiser, but you're going to be the trade protection cruiser in areas like the South Atlantic, etc., where I need something slightly larger to deal with the waves and the oceanic weather. But you know, what else could I be doing with that tonnage? Then the Landers are a good start to post-World War I cruiser building for the RN. Some of good enough, sort of good enough for a lot of things, and next generations get better and better until, I'm not going to repeat the swear word, but yes. The thing is, they are a good starting point. They are a good reset. They use a lot of interesting stuff from the E-Class, but they are a good reset. They take E-Class ideas, they take some of the Cranty class ideas, they find what works with light cruisers and what doesn't, and they start building from that. Until the Jack Hunter, that's actually a really interesting summary of the evolution of cruisers. Are there any interesting books on the subject so I can read more? Um, hmm. Freeman has all the facts in it, but he's taking a very American perspective on cruisers. You always have to remember he is in many ways, there is very much an American perspective on cruisers, i.e. the Pacific War cruisers, which are different in doctrine from how the British are building their cruisers. There are lots of people who have similar, are sort of getting close to that take, but I'm not sure if anyone's actually published one which is exactly that take and follows on. Freeman starts, this is always nice, Cruiser World War II, this is good. I do have a book on Harwood. Which does take that sort of idea and goes with it, but I can't see it at the moment. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Dudley Pope's book on the Battle of River Plate does get into it in some extent. And Harwood by one of my friends, but I've forgotten his name right now. That's terrible. That sounds absolutely atrocious and really, really bad of me, but I have forgotten his name. That's really cruel. I should remember his name. Actually, let me just Google it. That's probably easiest. Google the Harwood book. Peter Hall. Didn't even need to Google it. Just need to think about it. Peter Hall's Harwood book does go into it as well a bit. Dan Freeman, Jack Hunter, sounds like there may be a case for Dr. Clark writing one, but let's maybe get the first book in print first. Tempting. William Cox, Cleveland class light cruiser, 10,000 tons. Montgomery class cruiser, light cruiser, 10,000 tons. Refuse class, 500. Someone's fighting. Someone's fudging something here. The RN are building for numbers, and the RN are building for different roles. Jermac, Daniel Freeman. Now I wonder how the Leander would look if they would be built instead of parallel to the counties straight after E's. That is an interesting idea, and arguably they wouldn't have looked too different to the Leanders. They would have probably looked like expanded E's, though, with multiple double turrets. So the E-class developed around. Iron Car, would the RN and RAN and RNZN get involved in the procurement process of the RN? They did occasionally. Brock Payne, I love the Didos, they're cute. I think the Didos are very crammed. I often describe the tribal class as being destroyer cruisers and the Didos as being cruiser destroyers. Jeff Mueller, Leander amphibians to towns to colonies, line of them. Don't forget the air refusers. They're in there as well. It goes Leander's amphibians are refusers, towns, colonies, to crown colonies. So they basically go boom, boom, and down, and then they go okay and up. Decision. I do wonder how the late war Minotaur and succeeding ideas would have gone. Also loading with twin 6 inches with terrifyingly good fire control. That could have been interesting, but there also was one idea where they would be also loading with a treble 6-inch gun as well. It's going around. We can't count well. Oh well, the ships are already built. We might just use them if it would be a waste to scrap them. Honestly, you have to remember a lot of the treaties were defined by self-reporting, which is why I occasionally am a bit skeptical of some of the statistics and some of the figures putting from them. Standard displacement and full load, and sometimes those figures don't quite add up. As warships, the 1927 Koenigsbergs look better than Landers, but it looks like only until the first storm. Runcash, cruisers are like dietas, always lying about their weight. Yes, at the moment, my weight is very much more than it's supposed to be, so I do omit them. Definitely agree with that one on the cruisers. They are always lying about it, especially the standard displacement versus full load. Jeff Eder, the little pocket guides book on World War II cruisers are good. Liked all the changes. That's all changes. Cox, they're a lot lighter and weaker in structure until the antithesis of high speed running proved their undoing. They already worked. Heavily, Fourth Fleet incident had a ripple effect. Stephanie Wilson, Danny Freeman. That does remind me of a tale I heard that all the pigs raised privately for food in World War II never exceeded the weight that was set as the limit. No, they didn't. Amazing. Decision. Anyone think over that limit was supposed to be handed over for rations. Dirt Squad, Danny Freeman. Drax's video yesterday did a good job of covering it without ever actually mentioning it. Alzoxy, think I found it. Deutschland class, an almost super pre-dreadnought. Oh. Right. So, the Patreon vote options for October 2020. While I'm still here, because I am probably going to go not till the full 9 o'clock tonight, because I haven't eaten yet today, so I'm going to go order a takeaway. Because I was sorting out so much in the house, I forgot to have lunch. So I'm currently running on a banana and 2 bottles of Iron Brew. Not sensible. Old history. What if Germany managed to get the Type 21 U-boat into service in mid-1943? 20 boats by the end of the year with about 50 boats by mid-1944. What effect would this have on the Battle of the Atlantic? By Timothy Sims. The Forgotten Service, the U.S. Coast Guard, its contribution to World War II and beyond, the missions, men, equipment, and why they matter, by Matthew Scramback. The changing formation of the fleet, the organization and running of multi-ship formations over time. What consideration and change over different time periods, by Ed Stevens on YouTube, but Daniel Freeman on Patreon. That's currently, from last time I checked, in second place, but I'm not quite sure. It still is. Suez Goes Hot in 1956 by Martin Doherty. A cool one. The Treaty of London 1930 by Daniel Freeman, currently in first place at the moment, but last time I checked. And The Raid to Zeebrugge and Ostend in World War I by Simon Pratt. I will make a little video on Sunday to explain who wins. All right. So, yeah, they're all good ones. Can leave that up there. In car, South Africa does not seem to get involved in building programs like other domains. In view of their strategic location, why was this? Just didn't invest early enough. Honestly, if World War II hadn't happened until 1942, you probably would have seen South African cruisers. You probably would have seen Indian Navy cruisers, in terms of the things actually in service before World War II. This is the thing. World War II happens when it happens. Nick Taser, what did you make of the Quad 6 intended for the Edinburgh class? very, very complicated. I'm not a big fan of the quadruple turrets. It's in my world, the King George V's would have been armed with treble 15-inch guns, and that would have been sensible. Or treble 16-inch guns if they'd really wanted to just go full Nelson and just rebuild the Nelson design. Frederick, anything before 1906 should be considered a pre-dreadnought. Yeah, to an extent. Then if you're thinking of the world of warships Minotaur class, the RO might well have done better to use twin 6-inch turrets to allow more space for loading equipments for speed. William Cox, our class battleships were issued oars. They used them in the laundry to agitate the That wouldn't surprise me. Jack Hunter, on the subject of Peter Well, have you read his Sea Power Ashore? It's one of the many books on my Amazon list. It is good, and I like Peter Hall. He's a very nice guy. I've met him on a fair number of occasions. I exchanged many emails with him. He is a very committed, very passionate gentleman when it comes to history, and has written some very good books. Descott, I think almost everyone is suffering from lockdown bod at the moment. That is what I am suffering. I have gone from gym or swimming for an hour every day to doing nothing. Yeah. Going to spend most of the... my plan is to spend part of next week clearing a whole space so I can set up a bike I got, a nice sort of exercise bike I've managed to procure, so I can do that. Paul Bestwick, it's the reason Type 26 are not destroyers or cruisers is that it would mess up the rank structure as destroyers are commanded by captains. Not all destroyers these days are commanded by captains, and no, they're frigates because they're anti-submarine warfare. It used to be size that was the defining function. Now, to an extent, if you hear the thing frigate, unless there's anything else put before it, their anti-submarine warfare is their orientation. And if you hear destroyer, anti-air warfare is their orientation. General purpose capability, but anti-air warfare. And it's one of the reasons why I argue that the Type 31 should be called sloops, because they are general purpose in their assets, not in their focus, not anti-submarine warfare. So, therefore, they should be called sloops. Take care, Frederico Viga. That's good. Dr. Clark, I'm tempted to becoming a patron despite not really being able to afford it, just to propose a video on the Blackburn. William Cox. Type 21 was in desperate need of significant reworking. A lot were lost in test and training. It's basically you have to change some of their mechanics to actually get them in time. Be an interesting one to do, but there is a lot of things to come. I have to say I'm both surprised and quite pleased at how well number 4 and number 5 are doing. Mainly because I thought the Treaty of London would be rather boring for people, and so they might not be interested in it, but I'd quite like to do one. I haven't thought about doing it myself. And that's the thing, because I didn't think anyone would be interested. So the fact it's being proposed means that I'm rather happy it was proposed. Because I do think the treaties are kind of interesting, and going through them would be quite cool. The changing formation of the fleet, organization running a multi-ship formation over time, how and what consideration changed over different time periods is going to be, it will be quite a complicated one to get into, but again, could be quite cool. But it's sort of stuff I wasn't really expecting to be proposed in Patreon, so that's why both of them got put in many respects. I was expecting more like the other 4, but they're all cool. I'm happy to, as I said, happy to do any of them. And I do add in the note about the US Coast Guard one that I am not a US Coast Guard historian. I will do my level best to do it justice, but I'm still, if I miss any bits, it's not because I'm forgetting. It's not because I have decided they don't matter. It's mostly possibly because I don't know or I've forgotten. Because I'm going to do the formation of the US Coast Guard and its sort of things, and the various things that go into the US Coast Guard. There are lots of different organizations which end up becoming part of the US Coast Guard. And they take part in D-Day. They do all sorts of things. Rowan Cash, have to walk to new job and back in 45 minutes. Each way. Thank God I needed it. I need it. Yeah. Oh, Carl Gasman, the quad turret of the Zeus 23 Shilka and Millennium Falcon's quad lasers make a good range argument for 4-barrel turrets. Yes, but they're not 4 barrels spread out that way. They're managed to 4 barrels condensed. And they're smaller weapons than what you're talking about in terms of a 6-inch gun. Anyway, time for me to bow for night. Thank you for a great chat. See you on Sunday. There is no bilge pumps. There is no brew ships on Sunday at the moment scheduled. There might end up being one, but there isn't one scheduled. It's like the thing is, technically, I'm taking next week as a research week, so technically there's no live scheduled, but there might end up being a brew ships, because brew ships I don't really need to do much setup for. I just put the books together and have a chat. So there might be some impromptu brew ships. There might not. Jeff Beard, the Arse engine called the Wolfer Sloop. Yeah, they should probably. Danny Hrim, the problem with multiple guns in a mounting is that it can get cramped in turret to reload as quickly as with fewer guns. And big issue worry when going to spin 6 inch to triple in 6 inch and then quad mounts. Yeah, triple 6 inch is about the sweet point. Anything more than that gets very complicated. Anything less than that, well, you can overpower it with triple 6 inch. Strub, William Cox, I know all that in my 16 years I've done everything from force protection to working aid to navigation, but the public has no idea. That doesn't surprise me. Chris Martin, first time patron. I have gone for 4 and 5. Ooh, thank you. Remember, as far as I know, I've set it up. You get free votes. Oh. Dust God, my toes have been abandoned and are now cold. I was asking, well, you mentioned in the sleep video, treaties explain a lot, sometimes strange design choices. That is important to understand, even though it might be boring. Yeah. Jerson, bye and night. Enjoy your week next week, Dr. Clark. I'm going to be using it to mainly try and get ahead with some of the introduction videos and get some of the research done and get some other things set up for you guys because I think I enjoy it. And what definitely does start on Sunday is 4 Random Books, which is pre-recorded book reviews where I pick 4 books and I talk about them all and I try to get it done in 15 minutes. Try being the operative word. And I've now managed to record them so there'll be 1 a week of those coming out every week. I've already recorded all the way up to the end of March next year, and I'm working on April tomorrow. So it's going to be recorded well in advance. Alternate history, Battle of August attempt 1994. No lucky hit ends inclusively. Russians get away. Ooh, come on, re-research week. I am curious. Yes, but it also, I have timed that research week. Originally, I timed it in time with sort of things like, well, there's my mum's birthday this week, my girlfriend's birthday next week, and so, as I said, I took Wednesday off completely for my mum to go see my girlfriend. Would have been going up north and all sorts of things to go see her. That's not happening now because she's doing her PhD, and is basically, we had a slightly sad discussion, but an adult discussion, which was the lines of, if I'm up there, she's going to feel guilty about it from a PhD's perspective for spending time with me. But if she's doing her PhD while I'm up there and I'm just doing some work, she's going to feel guilty about not spending time with me and spending it with the PhD because I'm up there. So we've decided to put that off and hopefully still be able to meet up at some point in October when hopefully all her PhD stuff is done and in. So, you know. But luckily, I have sent her presents up, so she will have presents for her birthday. Hence, I'm now going to be around and definitely doing all this research and reorganizing the house a bit. Benjamin, what is your opinion of the Leander class frigates? What is your opinion of the 1970s BBC featuring them? Well, it's nice to have a BBC series about a ship, and the Leander class frigates, they're a product of their time. and they're quite a good product at their time, but they are second-class frigates. This is what I often treat them as. It's people don't understand. They are light frigates. They are second-class vessels, so they have. The idea was that each one would be orientated, and you'd have them form a task group together, where one would be the air defense, one would be the anti-ship, and one would be the anti-submarine, and that would be how they'd organized. And I'm not sure it really works. Right. Take care, everyone. I'm now going to go off and awesome tea. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found the Leander class interesting. They are really quite cool ships, and I hope you found this interesting. As I said, there will be a long patrol and several short videos produced next week that come out next week for on this subject and on Force K. So they will be part of next week, along with some other stuff. Probably, if I manage to get them finished in time so they're proper and they look nice, some of the joint videos that me and Daniel Freeman worked together for Crete. So that'll be some next week's videos. Anyway, take care. Thank you very much to everyone for being here. So thank you, Richard Hughes, Brock Payne, William Cox, Roland Cash, Daniel Freeman, of course, Jeff Beeler, Derp Squad, Calvin Kasberg. Thank you, Bijon. Thank you, Ian Carr. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Dunrick Ironhammer. Thank you, John Shea. Take care, everyone. Thank you, Albert Zaski. Take care. Thank you. Thank you, Angus Arnold. Take care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Just waiting for it all to catch up and all to work out. Thank you, Dikasu. Oh.